right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jenna Schrenar, Marketing Consultant at PCA Technology Group, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. So October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and our topic today is a futuristic look at cyber threats and protection. And we are very thankful to have Mike DePalma, VP of Business Development at Datto, here with us to share his expert insights. And I know we do just have 30 minutes of your time today, so just a couple of housekeeping items before we dive right in. Please don't hesitate to submit any questions you have at any time here in our Teams chat. I'll be closely watching that. We'll make sure to get those answered before we wrap up today. And this webinar will also be recorded, so you can expect an email from PCA within the next 48 hours with the recording and your $50 gift card as a thank you for joining us. And lastly, during this special awareness month, PCA is offering a free setup of the Datto SaaS Protection solution, which is the #1 way to safeguard yourself against permanent data loss with Microsoft 365. So I'm going to drop some details in the chat for anyone who wants to take advantage of that, and we'll talk more about it in this webinar. But with that being said, Mike, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm Mike DePalma. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Datto, now owned by PCA. I've been around for about 9 years over here. We're based down in Norwalk, Connecticut. That's our Datto headquarters, although our parent company is down in Miami. But we've focused primarily on the backup disaster recovery side of things. Now under the PCA umbrella, we do have all kinds of security products and networking and all the rest. But for the most part, what we're going to talk about is that data protection, talk about some of the threats that are out there currently, why they're attacking, and focusing on the small to medium-sized business community specifically, and then ways that you can go and protect your data. But I was just last week, I did a presentation alongside some folks from the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, and they give you crazy, scary stats, right? And one of the stats that they gave in their slide deck, and I took a picture of it, if you were to aggregate all of the money that these criminals are making on an annual basis, it would be the 3rd largest economy in the world behind just the US and China. That's how much money is being made by these criminals. And so you wonder, why these guys are so successful. At the end of the day, they don't really have to change their business model. The vast majority of these attacks are coming in through the old school phishing model. Now, AI is making it much more difficult to pick out these threats that are coming in, because they really do look like every other email in your inbox. But this is kind of the world we live in, and it will be a constant race. The one thing I will tell you is, when you look at protecting your business, and we'll get into what cyber resilience really means, this is not something that's commoditized. There's not a product out there that you're going to say, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of money on this product off the shelf and I'm going to be secure. It truly is an all-encompassing, multi-layered approach. So it's more of a mindset. It's more of getting your people to buy into this culture of security, putting the process in place to make sure everybody knows what to do. And then the technology comes in to actually go and protect that data. But I know it's Cybersecurity Month, and there's a bunch of these type of events. I'm doing a lot of these throughout the course of the month. But the conversation really needs to expand from cybersecurity to cyber resilience. That's usually the question I'll ask if I'm meeting with a business owner is, what's your cyber resilience posture? How resilient is your business? And what does that mean? Well, cybersecurity is exactly what it sounds like. It's all these security measures we're going to put in place to make sure that your business is never attacked. Cyber resilience takes it one step further and says, okay, we're going to put all of those things into place. But if you are attacked, how resilient are you? Because at the end of the day, the real leverage that all of these criminals have, whether it's ransomware or any of the other threats that we're seeing, it's the downtime to the business that's truly costly. So when we follow what's called the NIST framework, probably the most prevalent security framework, but there's a lot out there. I would suggest, just picking one and sticking with it. But when you look at the NIST kind of framework, it starts with identifying all the assets. You'll be very surprised how many times you go in and do an inventory and you don't understand where all your physical devices live, or what SaaS applications everybody has access to, and who has access to it, who has admin rights to it. These are the type of things you have to start with. So before you even have a conversation, you start with, okay, let's take a look at what we have in place now. And from there, you put in, a protection, system in place. How are we going to protect all of these assets? But really, when you get to cyber resilience, it comes in, okay, say something gets through. 90+% of these attacks occur because of user error. It's not normally a malicious insider. It's not normally a brute force attack. It's getting somebody to click on something they're not supposed to. Again, back to that people, process, and technology. So if you are attacked, how quickly are you detecting that an attack has occurred? On average, one of these attackers will be in your network for over 200 days before they start to detonate all of these things. They want to get their hands into as many things as possible. So detection is extremely critical. But beyond that, detecting it's great. What does your response look like? Does everybody in your organization know what they should do? If the fire alarm went off while you're watching this webinar, everybody would hopefully know where to go. If you were to, during this webinar, you're checking your emails, kind of listening in, and you click on an email you're not supposed to, or a hyperlink, or an executable document, and you get the scary red screen that says, hey, you've been hit with ransomware. Does everybody know what they're supposed to do, what those next steps are? Because that timer starts right when that attack occurs. And then ultimately, the most important part is recovery. On average, we do a study every single year on ransomware specifically. On average, a business is down about 20 days before they are fully operational again into a production environment. Last week, when I was with the FBI, their number was 16.4 days. They were very specific. The insurance industry is typically 20 to 25 days. So we're all in the same ballpark. We're talking about weeks of downtime as opposed to minutes or hours. And so really the big takeaway here would be to figure out what your cyber resilience posture looks like. How resilient would you be if something were to occur? The FBI, like I mentioned, they're always very scary. It's not a matter of if, but when you're going to be attacked. I get that, right? You hopefully you work with PCA and all those systems in place with the training. Nobody's clicking on those emails. But if something were to occur, how resilient are you? Now, I also like to look at kind of on a linear basis. There's this new terminology called the right-hand side of the boom. Now, it's actually a military term that they use. Okay, the left-hand side of the booms are all the preparation you're making to make sure that your unit is never attacked. But if you are attacked, what does that right-hand side of the boom look like? All right. For us, in this instance, we're talking about a cybersecurity attack. And you got to realize that during this, the criminals, they know the NIST framework. They know all of the right-hand side of the boom. So while we're putting in protections and everything to make sure you're secure, those criminals are doing that reconnaissance on your business. Fortunately or unfortunately, we all have to give so much information freely out on the web. You can search for me on LinkedIn right now, find out where I went to college, previous employers, other folks that I'm working with here, so that if that email comes out to Mike DePalma, it's going to look like an email that I might have gotten from my, alma mater or wherever that might be, right? So they're going to do all that reconnaissance. They're going to figure out how to weaponize this. Now, we look at the numbers from last year and the trillions of dollars that these folks are making, and the impact to the business community even further than that. That number is going to be up this year. I can tell you before I even see the numbers, because their business model works. And another scary stat that the FBI has given, and the problem with this that it's year after year, almost unchanged, is that 60% of small businesses that are attacked and are down for just a week or more cannot survive 12 months. They close their doors within 12 months. They're never able to recover. And I got questioned on it from somebody in the audience when I mentioned it, and I showed them a picture that I took from the presentation that the FBI gave with that number. And it's kind of, that to me, that's a scary number. In our report last year, only about 30% of business owners were highly concerned about these threats. So the criminals know they don't have to change anything. They know exactly what they're doing. So they're doing all those things on the left-hand side of the boom, but the timer starts right when that boom occurs. All right, the attack has occurred. They're trying to figure out what they can do. Immediately, they're going to try to go attack your backups. They're going to try to encrypt data that they have. And then they're going to put you in a mindset of, okay, pay me $10,000 in Bitcoin or be down for 20 days. What's going to be more impactful for your company? Clearly, it's a smarter business decision just to pay the $10,000, because being down for 3 weeks is going to be far more costly. That's the math they want you to do. All right. So that's why they're so successful in getting payments. Now, what the government is doing is they're saying, it just came out last year, they passed a law saying if you do pay the ransom, you have to report that within 48 hours. They used to not make you report it. Now, they would always say, don't pay the ransom. It emboldens these folks. It puts a bigger bullseye on your back, because once you pay once, you tend to pay again. So they'll keep attacking you until you put, security measures in place. But they finally put out a statement last year that said that if you pay the ransom, not only do you have to report it, you're actually at risk of being in violation of the law. And there isn't a law saying you can't pay a ransom, right? If somebody stole my dog, I could pay the ransom and I'm not at fault. The problem is the folks that are behind these attacks are typically terrorist organizations or enemy nation states or ties to an enemy nation state. So if you do pay that ransom, you could inadvertently be funding illegal terrorist organizations. Now, there's not a lot of teeth to that statement, because 99.9% of the time, they're asking for that money in Bitcoin. And once it's gone, it's very, very difficult to track where it went. Although there have been success stories of folks being able to get their money back, but very few and far between. And so there's not a lot of teeth to it, but it shows you the direction the government is going in. They're trying to get people to stop paying. So now you have to report it. There are some states that will list out all the companies that have been attacked. And you can go and you do not want to be on that list. Could you start to look at the ripple effects of these attacks? You don't want to be the company in your area, in your industry that's known for, hey, I saw an article about that company being attacked, right? Whether it was your fault, whether data was actually lost, company data, client data, employee data, the optics of it are not great. So we only see about 25% of these attacks being reported to authorities. The FBI, they're overwhelmed. They're not going to have the resources to go and investigate a $10,000 ransomware ask. They start at the $250,000, and even that, probably they won't put a ton of resources until it gets to seven figures. So we all know that we're all under attack on the vendor side, on the managed services side, especially on the small business side. Now, when we look at industries that are being attacked, it really has to do with the opportunistic nature of these criminals. We saw a huge uptick in attacks on the healthcare industry during COVID because who had more pressure on them, right, than the healthcare industry? We were seeing major hospitals getting attacked. They were intentionally keeping those out of the news to stop panic. But there were hospitals writing handwritten notes because they didn't have access to their system. We saw a big uptick in municipalities. We saw a big uptick in school systems, police departments. A lot of times, unfortunately, a lot of municipalities are vastly behind. But I think the bigger point is to take a step back. And at the end of the day, every single industry is vulnerable. That's the genius behind ransomware, in that they don't care whether your data is necessarily valuable down on the dark web. They just know that you can't operate without it, and that's why you'll pay. So when you look at why they're focusing on the small business community, well, at the end of the day, these guys are sales guys. That's just they're a corporate structure. There are people with quotas that are trying to get X amount of money and pay up to the folks that are creating the viruses. And you could be just like any other salesperson. If anybody on this webinar is in sales, you could try to be the home run hitter that goes after the whale, that goes after the 7-8 figure payout, knowing you're going to have a smaller chance of getting through, and then also a smaller chance of actually getting paid. A municipality doesn't pay. What they really want to do is disrupt it. Whereas a small business community tends to be less secure. They didn't put the resources in place. There's thousands of opportunities. They could just blast out thousands of these emails a day, and they know that the small business community tends to pay because they don't have any other option. They don't want to be part of that 60% statistic. So that's why the target really has shifted its focus on the small business community. I've been giving ransomware and cybersecurity presentations for close to 9 years now. 9 years ago, if I was talking about ransomware, I'd see an audience of people on their phone. Why would they attack me? They're attacking the big guys, and that's what's in the news. Now I'm getting a lot more head nods. Now people are taking out their phone and taking pictures of some of these slides because either they've been attacked, a competitor has been attacked, a client of theirs, or they're just seeing local news stories about small businesses that are being attacked. That's great. But again, I go back to that number of only 30% of small business owners are highly concerned about this when it really is the biggest threat to the small business community. And I mentioned the cost of the downtime being the real impact. And there's a lot of stories, and we could pick any amount of stories to kind of correlate to this. But the one that I always kind of talk about is a college called Lincoln College out in Illinois. This college has been around for 157 years. Last winter in December, they were hit with ransomware. And it was right during enrollment season. It was a small university, small college that had under 1,000 people in enrollment. And they were down for 3 months before they could start accepting these applications and processing in them and all the rest. And after 157 years, they had to close their doors. They were never able to recover. Enrollment had dropped to the point where they couldn't sustain the college. And after 157 years, this college closed its doors. Now, extremely sad story, but there's a million stories like this throughout the small business community. And again, it wasn't that Lincoln College never got their data back. It was their resilience and how quickly they can get their data back. Backup is fantastic. It's really only as good as the speed in which you can recover that. So what happens? How often are these folks being hit? During this webinar, thousands of businesses will be hit with ransomware as I'm talking. It is a crazy statistic that continues to rise year after year after year. And we're also seeing, other types of impacts like business email compromise or wire fraud. And we saw a lot of that during the pandemic when everybody was working from home. And naturally, your guard drops a little bit. We were seeing a lot of those attacks. But again, where are these attacks coming from? It's the low-hanging fruit. It's the phishing attack. So I could tell you they will follow the path of least resistance. There's so much low-hanging fruit for these guys that if you could at least show up front that I'm going to be a difficult company for you to come in and attack, chances are they'll move on to the next one, especially if they're asking for $5,000, $10,000 because they just want to do it in volume. So if you become a problem for them and they don't want to put the resources in to continue to attack you, they tend to move on. And if you could show once that you're resilient and you can get your data back and you don't have to pay, well, now all of a sudden you become way less of a target to them. So there's two acronyms, and we could acronym you to death, but the two big ones that apply to cyber resilience and something that needs to be in your incident response plan, whatever you want to title that plan to make sure you're protected, are your RPO and your RTO. Now, the RPO is a simpler one to answer. It's your recovery point objective. How much data can you lose before it significantly impacts your business? That essentially how often are you taking those backups? Are they daily? Well, then you're saying to yourself in your incident response plan that we could absorb losing a day's worth of data and it's not going to break the bank. If you're highly transactional, that typically is more closer to an hour per backup, but it might be even more frequent. Could be 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever that is. But you have to identify that because that's the first piece of leverage that they have. They're holding your data and you've got no backup and no way to recover it. Of course you have to pay. Your only other option is to start from scratch, which typically means you're closing your doors. But the real impact, the real leverage that they have, again, the right-hand side of that boom, the recovery time objective. How long can you be down before it significantly starts to impact your business? And then that's great. That's your objective. But how do we get to that number? And you got to come up with a realistic number. You can't say 10 seconds. What does it look like? Can I be down for 4 hours? Can I be down for 16.4 days or 20 days or 25 days? Probably not. If that's your recovery time objective, that's going to be very, very tough to survive. So coming up with those two numbers, okay, what's my recovery time objective and what's my recovery point objective? You start to say, okay, well, now if I've got my recovery point objective to a point, whether it's hourly, that's acceptable. And then on the other side, I could say, okay, well, I could be down for 4 hours or 8 hours or a day, and I know I've got a resiliency plan to put that in place. You've now taken the leverage off of both of those, and the criminals will tend to move on. So essentially what's happening is, and this is whether it's an on-premise server or even up in the cloud, you'd have a backup that lives, if it's a local device, it would live sitting right on your local device. And the way the backups are occurring are different than the traditional backups. I mentioned the first thing these criminals are going to try to do is find your backup and encrypt that data as well. So instead of backing up data on the file and folder level, this is a full image of that server. That image lives on an on-premise device, and then it subsequently gets sent off to our 2 data centers. So we've got 9 globally, but we've got 2 here in the States. We've got 1 in Pennsylvania, 1 out in Utah. So you've got that geo redundancy as well. But these are full images, and it gives the ability to do a couple of things. One, you're not missing any volumes. It's capturing not only the files and all the rest, you're capturing the operating systems, the applications. It's a true image of whatever that server looked like. So you understand that you've got everything there. Now, once you get that full base image, you sit down with PCA, you say, okay, I have a recovery point objective of 1 hour. I'm going to set up these hourly backups. But what's happening is it's not taking a full backup of that machine every single hour. It's just looking at the block level changes that are occurring between those 2 points in time. And so it gives us the ability to create what's called this inverse chain. And this is not to try to get too technical, but ultimately every one of those backup points is an independent instance. There's no risk of them getting in and impacting previous backups. So if you are attacked at 11 o'clock, you know that 10 o'clock backup is safe. Also gives you the ability to detect ransomware as it's occurring. It's not looking for individual variants. Those are popping up every single day. What it's doing is it's saying, all right, every one of these attacks essentially leaves a footprint that looks very similar. Its backups are going along. They look relatively similar. Ransomware attack occurs. Every single file gets encrypted. It's going to jump off the screen and throw an alert up saying, hey, this looks like every other ransomware attack that we've seen. Now, it could be a false positive. Maybe you needed to take a full backup or whatever that was, but at least you're being alerted in real time. Say, hey, this looks like an encrypted backup. Here's your last clean backup. But ultimately, what it gives you the ability to do, and this is where the resiliency side, and this is what separates it from traditional backup, is right now, most people's first reaction is, okay, I get attacked. I got to start restoring this backup. I got to get a new server in place, start restoring this backup. With business continuity, you actually have the ability to virtualize that server. So essentially failing over to this on-premise device. And it's a true production environment. If it's happening at the local level, many times the actual employees won't even know that that's happened. You have access. It's a true production environment. You could take active backups in the state. And when you've done the forensics on that device and identified what happened, you've got a new device in place, you could start the restoration while your team is still up in a virtualized state. So everybody's working business as usual. So now you're reducing that downtime from days or weeks to minutes or hours to make sure everybody's up and running, access to everything, a true production environment. That's critical. So again, somebody clicks on that screen, Jim down the hall, didn't listen to this webinar, clicks on something he's not supposed to, gets this scary red screen. It's a call over to PCA to spin up that virtual machine. And now everybody that had access to that server that's been encrypted has access to everything that they need. And they're operating, and you could do this either locally, or if there is a compromise to that device, whether it's a fire or a flood or even just a hardware failure, you can do the same thing from the cloud as well. And these virtualization capabilities are being tested every single day. Every day, it's brought up to a boot screen every night. A little snapshot is taken with the timestamp that says, yes, not only is the data there, and we've been testing all the backups, these virtualization capabilities have been tested as well. So now you could start to answer those RTO and RPO questions. And you could see, the dashboard, which, you wouldn't really see, but PCA would, that shows you all of these things have been verified. That is extremely important for a couple things. One, for compliance, because again, what the government's doing, putting all these regulations in, if you are attacked, even if you are able to recover, they're going to come knocking on your door and say, show me your incident response plan. How have you been protecting your data? Has it been being tested? All of these different types of things. The other big piece is on the cyber insurance side. Now, cyber insurance has changed drastically in the last few years. It used to kind of be the Wild West. They didn't have actuary tables to understand really how to price these. In 2021, the insurance industry lost money. Insurance industry does not lose money. So they revamped their entire application process. It now has gone from a few pages to, I was at a peer group a couple months back in Cincinnati. An MSP brought in an application that was 103 pages long. Right. And the reason being is they understand that it's now become the smoker and non-smoker. If you're not doing certain things, you are more of a risk. And they have the actuary tables to say the folks that aren't doing X, Y, and Z, we continue to have to pay out on these policies. We're going to deem a lot of folks uninsurable or price it at a point where it's unaffordable. And so they want to see this reporting. All right. Now, we mentioned earlier about, SaaS protection for Microsoft 365. These criminals were very, very opportunistic. Why would you need to buy that? Why would you need a backup? It's Microsoft. Nobody's attacking Microsoft. Well, there is a variant out there called ransom call. There's actually a lot of variants, and they were ready to seize upon this. And when COVID hit and everybody moved up to the cloud and we work remotely, they were ready. There's a gentleman, actually, he just passed away, but a very interesting guy. His name is Kevin Mitnick. He was on the FBI's most wanted list back in the 90s. Very high profile arrest. He was caught, went to jail. He spent several years in jail, came out, and now he worked for the good guys. He was an ethical hacker. He was showing the government and the business community what he would be doing if he was a criminal. And we hired him to come to our large DattoCon conference back in 2019, June of 2019. And he stood up and did a demo of a virus that he created. And he said, if I was a criminal right now, I would be focusing on Microsoft 365. And within minutes, he sent out an email, looked like every other email. It just said, hey, update your spam filter or whatever that was, looked like it came from Microsoft. The moment you clicked on that, every single email was encrypted. And going back to my earlier statement about understanding who has access, we saw a lot of businesses just carte blanche giving everyone admin access because it was easier. Well, that person had admin access. It can now impact the entire domain. And the only email you could open is the one with Kevin's scary red screen saying, pay me some money in Bitcoin and I'll encrypt this stuff. That was June 2019. Think about how much that would have evolved over the last 3 years. And if Kevin Mitnick was thinking about it, believe me, the criminals were thinking about it. So we saw a huge uptick in attacks on these software as a service applications. And again, they're not going brute force into Microsoft's cloud or Google's cloud. They're allowing somebody to open the door and let them in. It's typically, again, some phishing email that's going to allow you to do that. And Microsoft, Google, all the major SaaS applications, they've got what's called the shared responsibility model. They're very open about this. again, I've done a lot of panels with folks from Microsoft, and they will talk to an audience of businesses saying, you bear responsibility here. This is a partnership. We will protect the integrity of our cloud. But the actual data that lives within it, that is the responsibility of the tenant. And you could look this up in your user agreement, go to their forums. They don't have any liability. They actually encourage you to back up in a third party. Microsoft doesn't want to be in the world of backup. They encourage that. And so when you look at what Microsoft protects and what's in your agreement, things like hardware failure within their cloud, the software failure, those type of things, that is what their responsibility is. Whether it's you or whether you're working with PCA and they hold that contract, anything from human error, any of those malicious insiders, those type of things, that's your responsibility. That's what this shared responsibility model looks like. And, if anybody has any questions, we do have a couple minutes left, but one of my favorite quotes of all time, and I use it from Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Everybody thinks they're protected until something happens. So beyond putting this together, and I highly encourage you, before you even start talking about products and vendor this, go back and put together that incident response plan and get your entire team bought into this. I always encourage, get input from everyone else about this. You put that plan together, now all of a sudden, you're prepared. So Jenna mentioned the free setup on SaaS Protection. I would highly recommend taking advantage of that. Here's the email address, but I don't know if any questions have come in, or Jenna, you want to chime in with any additional thoughts?
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Mike. Really can't thank you enough for taking some time with us to share those insights. I mean, such an important topic, and love your perspective on the cyber resilience and the importance of really equipping ourselves, especially in today's world. So if anyone here has any questions for Mike, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. But again, as we wrap up here, just another reminder that PCA is offering that free setup of Datto SaaS Protection. I did drop the link in the chat if you want to take advantage of that. It's quick, affordable, first step to really boost your defense. So if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to info@pcatg.com. But it doesn't look like we have any questions. So thanks again to Mike, everyone who joined us today. Stay tuned for the PCA email follow-up with this webinar recording and your $50 gift card. And stay tuned for more events. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jenna.
Thank you.
The cloud is the new standard for small businesses everywhere. Software as a service, called SaaS applications like Office 365 and G Suite, live in the cloud and give your business tools that are affordable, easy to use, enable collaboration on documents in real time, and allow your employees to work from anywhere. But what does in the cloud actually mean? When your applications live in the cloud, it simply means that your data is stored in Microsoft or Google's servers rather than your own IT closet. You don't have to pay for the applications to be available all the time, or for software or hardware upgrades, but you do need to protect the data you and your employees create in the form of emails, files, and internal sites. Today, 1 in 3 users have experienced data loss in the cloud. The most common cause of data loss comes right from inside your business. Your employees or third-party applications have the power to delete data from cloud apps, whether it's on purpose or by accident. Just because your data is living in someone else's server doesn't mean it's immune to malicious attacks. Take ransomware. This form of malware can hold your data hostage unless you pay a ransom, and ransomware attacks in the cloud are on the rise. The benefits of moving to the cloud outweigh the risks, but could your company survive if all of your data was lost? What would you do without your emails, calendar appointments, contacts, files? As a business owner, you need to reduce the risk of losing data so you can focus on growing your business. But the recovery options in your SaaS applications are incomplete, cumbersome to use, time-consuming, or just plain unavailable. There's an easy way to protect your cloud data. Introducing SaaS Protection. SaaS Protection is your fail-safe in the cloud. If an employee deletes an important email, accidentally or maliciously, your IT expert can simply restore the latest version right to you or another user, all without ever stepping foot in your office. If you get hit with ransomware, your IT provider can restore emails, files, and sites in the state they were in before the infection. Not only that, but by saving your data automatically in SaaS Protection, you simply pay for the backup, not the entire SaaS license fee when an employee leaves the company. Rest easy in your move to the cloud and focus on your business with the Cloud Backup Expert. SaaS Protection is comprehensive data protection in the cloud. Ask your IT provider to try it today to ensure your business against data loss no matter what.